There's a new Wuthering Heights movie coming out, which means it's time once again for society to ask the important question: is this the most romantic love story ever written, or a 400-page warning sign? And more importantly, why is it still such a classic? Here are the 6 reasons Wuthering Heights still haunts us nearly 200 years later. 1. Easy structure, extreme people. If Heathcliff is the prototype of the dark, obsessive anti-hero, Catherine is the blueprint for the masochistic, self-annihilating lover. The fantasy structure is simple, effective, and timeless. Love means suffering. Pain means proof of passion. And his cruelty? A wound that only she can heal. We see this same DNA in Nate and Cassie from Euphoria. They don't want a nice date. They want an intensity so high it feels like a physical injury. In Wuthering Heights, emotional stability is for background characters. Other couples. We love each other. Catherine and Heathcliff, we have ruined each other's lives. Therefore, it's real. 2. The I will save him syndrome. Catherine took one look at Heathcliff, a vengeful, emotionally unavailable man fueled almost entirely by spite, and said, "Yes, that one. That's my soulmate." When she says, "I am Heathcliff," it's meant to be romantic, but it also sounds like the opening line of a very expensive therapy journey. It's the same magnetism we see in Allie and Jackson from A Star is Born. She pours her soul into a man who is drowning, believing her love is the only thing keeping him alive. Romance has long sold women the idea that if a man is cruel, cold, or violent, it's just because he hasn't been loved properly yet. And Wuthering Heights goes, what if she loves him with her entire soul, and he still becomes worse? The novel both invents the I can fix him fantasy and quietly whispers, babes, you cannot. 3. The dangerous lover fantasy. Wuthering Heights is an early, iconic version of the dangerous lover fantasy that still dominates romance today. Romance didn't suddenly get toxic with the Twilight Saga or 50 Shades of Grey. This is part of a centuries-long obsession with the dark, controlling, emotionally volatile man who is supposedly redeemed by love. Even in an era of feminism and empowerment, we are still weirdly drawn to the controlling, the emotionally damaged, the morally questionable man. Heathcliff is basically the 19th century blueprint for Edward Cullen, Christian Grey, and every modern anti-hero with a tragic backstory and terrible coping skills. If Bridget Jones dated Heathcliff, even she would be like, no, this man is not an emotional fuckwit. This man is an emotional war crime. And yet, we get it. Because Wuthering Heights taps into the fantasy that love should be overwhelming, consuming, and just a little bit dangerous. Like emotional skydiving without checking whether the parachute is actually a red flag. 4. Female masochism, but make it gothic. Heathcliff is part of a romantic tradition where male cruelty isn't a bug, it's a feature. But Catherine doesn't want a healthy relationship. She chooses emotional torment. She binds herself to a man who destroys her, loving in a way that hurts, humiliates, and consumes. She wants drama, intensity, possibly death. She is the original version of every character in a Colleen Hoover novel. If Heathcliff had a dating profile on Tinder, it would say, emotionally unavailable, enjoys brooding, revenge, and making everyone in a 5-mile radius miserable. He's not a bad boy. He's a bad life choice. Catherine is the blueprint for, he's awful to everyone, but he's different with me. Except, he's actually not. Even when the man is cruel or dangerous, the genre whispers, he is only this way because he hasn't been loved properly yet. Catherine doesn't fix Heathcliff, and that's what makes Wuthering Heights feel so raw and modern. It exposes the fantasy while still indulging it. 5. Why are we still into this? You never wonder. Does he like Catherine? You wonder, will he destroy himself, her, or the entire extended family first? Heathcliff isn't just a hot psycho. He's part of a fantasy structure where love is proven by endurance of pain. And in a world where modern love is confusing, exhausting, and and full of mixed signals, stories like this offer something strangely comforting, much like the twisted obsession in Emerald Fennell's Saltburn. When we watch Oliver Quick dismantle a family dynasty, we aren't looking for a happy ending. We're looking for a place to rehearse fear and desire from a distance, emotional chaos with narrative certainty. 6. The fantasy of surrender. In real life, women are expected to be autonomous, strong, independent, and constantly making the right choices. These stories offer the fantasy of surrendering control, but inside a romantic structure that still feels meaningful. Modern woman. Career. Boundaries. Emotional intelligence. Google Calendar. Gothic heroine. I have made one decision: to emotionally attach myself to this unstable man on a windy hill. The rest is fate. Even after feminism, fantasies of dominance and submission don't disappear. Think of the cultural explosion of 50 Shades of Grey. It wasn't just about the red room, it was about Anastasia Steele, a woman with a blank canvas of a life, submitting to the overwhelming, hyper-certain world of Christian Grey. Because in these stories, submission isn't framed as humiliation. It's framed as proof of trust, passion, and that the emotion is real. Catherine doesn't submit in a literal BDSM sense, but she absolutely submits to the emotional force of Heathcliff. She lets that love define her identity, her choices, and ultimately her destruction. So why is Wuthering Heights still a classic? Because modern love is so confusing that a fantasy where one man is intensely, obsessively certain about you feels weirdly reassuring. Heathcliff may be emotionally unhinged, vengeful, and cruel, but he is never unclear about his feelings. Maybe we don't fall for these stories because we're foolish. Maybe we fall for them because in a world of emotional ambiguity, certainty, even terrifying certainty, feels like love.